Everybody gets a seat. That's amazing. It's a pretty crowded room. I'm estimating over 60 people, at least, if not more. So welcome everybody to the last step, the last edition, the special edition of TechPeaks Academy. We have been running this event for all the spring, for the second half of TechPeaks. We've run already 4 of these events. This is the 5th. And it's a special edition because we decided to have an event to recognize the local startup scene in front of our mentors that come from the US, Europe, and Eastern Europe to Trento for meeting the TechPeaks startups. TechPeaks, for those of you who have not yet heard the name, is the People Accelerator. It's the accelerator that we run in Trento. We take teams from all over the world to work here with us with a local startup scene for 4 months. More words on this later. TechPeaks Academy has been a series of events that we run with our mentors to open up on a public event with the local startups, researchers, students, to make also them know more about what is happening outside of Trentino. And in this occasion, since we have here many mentors this time, we decided to also have them see what's happening in Trentino with the local startups, not only with the startups from TechPeaks. So it's my pleasure. My name is Paolo. I'm Managing Director of TechPeaks. I work for Trento Rise. Trento Rise and Trentino Sviluppo are the two institutions behind TechPeaks, and we have had a lot of support from all the other institutions in Trentino, and we have here, well, the province of Trento has been funding this, and of course supporting, and the APIAE, that is the local institution for support to companies, funding to companies, that has been working with us for over 2 years now to make this happen and to fund the startups in a new way locally. So we have a lot of representatives here. What we're going to do first, we're going to open with a pitch competition for the local startups. These are the startups that are going to present for 90 seconds. It's a very short pitch. It's very hard. We have a jury to assign some support, extra support from our some partners of ours, namely in this occasion Amazon Web Services and Google. And we're going to make it explicit better at the end what this support is, but it's basically credits and more support from them specifically for the startup that qualifies as the winner tonight. So we also have, we've done this, we've organized this event with a lot of local partners, so the other incubators that are active in the region. 2 of them are going to sit in the jury. Well, there's, where are they? Progetto Manifattura and Eurixe there are also present on the jury. Where are Jacopo and Roberto? Oh, here they are, perfect. Thank you for being here. And the others might be joining later, but since they're not here now, they won't be part of the jury. And then on the jury, we also have our mentors that convened today. So Sean, Rumen, Renaud, Vitaly, and Micheal, Bindi, Andy, and Evan. I will introduce them a bit more in a second. And Michele, if you want to join the jury, you're welcome. And Fausto will join us later, so he's not in the jury for the moment. These people are going to talk later in 2 different formats. Some of them are giving a fire talk. So if you know tent conference, we ask them to condense their knowledge in 10 minutes. Oh, by the way, Andrea, Gaiva, and Domenico, there are 2 business angels from Italian Angels for growth, they'll also be part of the jury. Some of our mentors, they will give a TED-like talk of 10 minutes, and the others will be sitting on a panel. So Sean, he's been an entrepreneur for 15 years. He's sold 2 companies, and he's now a venture capital investor. He's running 2 funds. He's active in the US mostly, but he's considering more and more to invest in Europe. Right? Right. So Michael is just moved back to the USA for his new adventure recently, 3 months ago. He's been based in Moscow and Russia for a long time, and then in London, where he helped develop Badu into what it is now. And he's also run a number of companies, and now is on his last vision. Right. Thank you much for being here. Right. Rumen, he is an investor, seed investor from Sofia, Bulgaria. He's been working also with some startups from TechPeaks, and cross fingers, nothing has happened yet, but we never know. So he's a seed investor, very active in Southeastern Europe, not only Bulgaria. And yeah, so thank you, Roman. Right, Bindi. Yeah. So Bindi arrived on a flight today for us. She is working with the Silicon Valley Bank, European investment. No.
In London.
Yeah, in London. Yeah. And she's director. Poor Paula. So she's an investor. She's a troublemaker in Europe. You'll see her around also working a lot with the Startup Initiative, Startup Europe Initiative, and getting more and more involved European-wide, not only in London. So thank you, Bindi. Renaud Visage is one of the co-founders, as he said today, correcting me, from co-founder to one of the co-founders of Eventbrite.com. Which is a small startup that has 8.5 years of experience, and how many million tickets sold? Billion.
200.
200 million tickets sold and growing.
That was just today.
Right. Oh, right. Just today. Okay. So he's been like Mike and Andy and Evan and Vitaly, a mentor already with TechPeaks last year. And he's back this year. We're very happy. Thank you, Renaud, for coming back. Andy Parsons. Andy Parsons is a multiple-time CDO. He's been growing companies and selling them. As a CDO and growing like international engineering teams. He's well now. He's been working on APIAE. APIAE is a platform to make people happy, and it came out that you can sell happiness. And and he's already moving on another project as well. So very busy person. Thank you, Andy, for coming back. Vitaly, Golomb. Vitaly. Yeah, right. Vitaly, he has been working on startups since the age of 13, and he's a startup monkey, as he defined himself. And he is running a company already now. He's also gone through many startups before. He is, as a background, is a designer. He's also founding and starting and growing the ecosystem in Ukraine, where he's originally from, but he's grown up and is based in California. So it's an example of bringing back to your country of origin, and is going to talk more about this. on the panel. Thank you, Vitaly. Emre Nisselson. So Emre has been with us since the beginning. He's one of the designers, together with a lot of other people, me and others, of TechPeaks. He's an angel investor at the moment. He's done also startups, and he's raised capital, and he's now investing in companies, mostly in the vision, computer vision, and all the image stack, but you never know. So thank you, Evan. And Fausto Giunchiglia is president of Trento. He's professor at the University of Trento. He's been dean of the Department of Computer Science. And yeah, so he's been working on the innovation scene for a long time in Trentino. He'll be joining us later. And last but not least, Michele is now working in a new role for the province of Trento. He's been working a lot for companies in the region by getting them funded on innovation projects for the last 20 years, mostly, 15, 20 years. But he is one of the people that is working most for the economic development of the region. So thank you, Michele, for being here. Right, so I'll go now to this slide again, and I'll help the startups to get started and put up your presentations. I'll read now the order of presentation of the startups for you to get ready. So it's that one. So Extensa's going first, Libon, then we have RoboSense, Movie, U-Hopper, and Crowd Cafe. Okay, this is you rate left to right and then down. For the jury, if you don't have it, I have a block here of papers, okay, or you can pass it around. So the paper that you have the startups in the order they will present. I asked you to put 2 crosses. So before you vote, wait before you vote, okay, until the end, until you've seen all the pitches. There's a 90-second speech, and then how many minutes interaction allowed? Francesca, Matteo, who's around? Okay, they'll be coming and tell us. So you have very short interaction with the startups, and then we go to the next one. So at the end of the 6 pitches, just cross 2 of the startups, the best in your mind. And if you, around one of those crosses, I want you to add a circle to the one that you think would deserve to win in case of draw. Okay, so in case of draw and the number of crosses, we will count the circles. And that will help us solve the draw. Okay, do you all have this? Here in the front line, yes. In the back, yes? Okay, perfect. So we're set. No time for interaction? Just pitches?
We're a bit late. No time.
No time for interaction?
If you want, yes, but we're a bit late.
Shall we leave 1 minute for interaction? So just one question, basically. Okay. So let's start. Okay, first on stage. Tonight, from the local ecosystem down to the contamination lab, as it's called, we have Extensa.
Thanks, good afternoon. So there are about 2,000 people in Italy and 20,000 people in Europe every year that actually have the ability that let them interact with the external world only through their eyes. To do so, what you basically need is an eye tracker, which is a device able to tell where you're looking at. Unfortunately, these kind of devices are very expensive, both for families and for hospitals. So they cost about 15,000 to 20,000 euros. And Extensa was actually born with the special, with the specific requirement of making eye tracking accessible. So to do so, what we basically did was to remove the hardware components, very expensive hardware components, and use some off-the-shelf hardware together with some efficient software algorithms. So the result is Eye Assist, which is a low-cost eye tracker, which works on commercial PCs, and it delivers most functionalities like communication and entertainment applications, and plus it also integrates with their home automation system at a cost of about 1/10 of the competitors. So the tool of eye tracking, of course, is not just about disabled people and impaired people, and we are currently working also on other, let's say, on other application areas, including attention evaluation, marketing, and web usability. So I'm Micheal, I'm a co-founder of Extensa, and I think that eye tracking is not only about technology, but it's mostly about people. Thanks for listening.
Great, Micheal. Thank you. So we go for a 1-minute interaction while I put up the slides. Vitaly.
What is your total addressable market size?
Well, so far we target at let's say hitting 20% of the market in Italy and slowly moving towards Europe. So the market, as I have said already, it's quite tiny so far. And the reason why we started with this application was from a request from a doctor that we are in touch with. The idea of moving towards these other applications is actually to completely expand the market, going towards more commercial and let's say consumer applications.
Okay. 15 seconds more. No feedback? Great, thank you. Thank you, Micheal. Right. Let's go to Livon.
Livon.
Go.
OpenMove is the smartest way to pay for parking slots and bus tickets. Trentino has 500,000 residents and over 5 million unique tourists per year. It has the highest life quality in Italy and the highest ICT investment, but it still doesn't have a mobile ticketing solution. Why so? Where is the pain? Well, users typically have to download 3 to 5 different apps in order to buy for different mobility services. Providers have to pay fees, and it's very labor-consuming to implement a mobile ticketing solution. Thanks to OpenMove, we enable citizens to pay for every kind of mobility service. So we have car, bus tickets, ski bus, car sharing, bike sharing, and many others on the way. We enable providers with a turnkey, completely free solution, and we involve local merchants. So they have a chance to push geolocalized advertising in order to convey users within their shops. So the scenario is a user parks his car and he gets a 30% discount, he gains credit and travel for free. We already secured 6 partnerships here in Trentino. We got funded by Trentino Sviluppo. So from September, you all are going to be able to pay for car, bus and train here in Trentino, and this is just the beginning. Thank you very much.
Perfect. 1 minute 30. Thank you. You didn't say your name?
Lorenzo Modena, CEO.
Right. Any interaction? Any question? Yes.
I'm a car sharing user here in Trentino, and I'd like to ask if it will substitute my card, my physical card.
Yeah, definitely. Starting from September, we're going to provide our solution to the bus company, to parking company in Moderator, Trento, and every other small town. And we have a partnership with Trentino Marketing for the 5 million tourists, for a ski bus and every kind of shuttle they need to get on holiday locations.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, next on stage, RoboSense. Voila, you go. Okay. RoboSense.
Hi to everybody. I'm Alberto, I'm the CEO of RoboSense. Here you see Micheal, which is a co-founder of RoboSense. And this picture was taken 2 days ago after the installation of our last system in Iliev. Why Micheal is wearing such a fancy garment? Because with this garment, we are going to disrupt the market of body measurement. Thanks to a unique technique based on commercially available cameras, we are going to produce 3D dense reconstruction for human shapes. This in a very fast and cost-effective way. As now, we produce a scanning system capable of acquiring the full 3D shape of a human torso. And we already sold 2 of these devices to Italian producers of medical corsets. We already established a commercial partnership for the Italian market, but now we want to move to the European market and grow again. But there is one more important thing. A human being is not a static shape. It moves, and so is its shape. What we want to do now is to improve our system in order to include in the shape tracking the motion tracking. In this way, create a new market for fashion, sport, and entertainment. Thank you very much.
Okay. You cheated a bit, but it's fine because it took you less than 1.5 minutes. So, interactions, questions. Anybody? Bindi.
I didn't understand the medical use case. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah.
I don't need a slide. It's fine.
For the system?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we sold the system for orthopedics. We built a custom corset for people with yes.
Got it.
Yeah, but for more, with the system we can measure. We use the system to measure the illness, promotional illness. For example, you have a broken shoulder. We can measure after the damage if you lost any angle in some model, for example, the above.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. RoboSense. Next on stage, Ruby.
Hello, my name is Micheal, and I'm co-founder of Movie. What is Movie? Well, Movie is a device that is based on vision technology, and that is used for control of heating, cooling, and ventilation in mainly in commercial buildings. And why Movie? Why Movie? Because we think we saw an opportunity. If you think there is no reason for cooling or heating a place where no one is in there, and there is no reason for delivering a high ventilation flow rate like here if no one is in here. And this is why. And how does it work? Well, it works, as I said, through vision technology, video acquisition, and Movie analyzes the indoor environment and evaluates the crowding of the environment and the level of activity, the activity rate. In this way, we can adapt the performances of heating, cooling, and ventilation, and in this way, we can save money by energy saving. And sorry, we are now testing the device. We will be on the market, I hope, before the end of the year.
All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So, any question for Movie? Yes, Andy.
So just in terms of the economics and selling this product, how much money or percentage can you save people who are heating or cooling spaces?
Well, we have evaluated that you can pay the investment in about 3-5 years. That is usually in this kind of market, energy saving is a very good time for a short time.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to say thanks. So next on stage is you, Hopper.
Not on stage, actually. One more. Thank you, Paolo. Good afternoon. My name is Daniele Grandi, and in the next 84 seconds, I will answer to a problem affecting all store managers. What do my customers do within my store? The answer is actually pretty simple. It's called Retailerin, our in-store analytics service for the retailing industry. Now, if you wonder why I'm here with a shopping cart, it's because the core of what we do at Retailerin is to track with high accuracy and in real time how shopping carts and shopping baskets move inside a store. We then crunch all such location and mobility data, and we transform it into actionable analytics for the store managers and for marketers, helping them to improve performance of the store and optimize customer service. Our targets are retail chains and grocery stores. Retailerin provides them with objective metrics on customers' behaviors inside the store, including footfall levels, movement patterns, and queue analytics. This data can be used, for example, to optimize staff management, to improve the placement of products within the store, and to measure the effectiveness of a given layout. We have a pilot deployment in a supermarket here in Trento, so if you are interested, we will be delighted to take you tomorrow on a tour to show you live how it works. For more info, follow us on www.retailerin.com.
So what is the product exactly? Is it cameras or motion or all the above?
No, we basically put on shopping carts tags like this, and we have some antennas that we put on the ceiling. These are provided by our technology partner Kupa, a Finnish company, and thanks to them we can basically measure with 20 centimeters accuracy and with a sampling of half a second what is the actual position of shopping carts and shopping baskets. That's how it works.
Is it beacon or Wi-Fi?
Mike.
Go on a little bit further down. Is it beacon, Wi-Fi? What is it? Low frequency? What is it?
It's basically Bluetooth Low Energy with a proprietary solution, which the guys from Finland, it's a spin-off of Nokia, are actually pushing to become part of the Bluetooth standard for the first quarter of next year.
All right.
Thank you.
And now, Crowd Cafe.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pavel, and I'm a PhD student here at the University of Trento, and I'm here to present to you Crowd Cafe, mobile crowdsourcing platform for easy and fun tasks execution. So my co-founder Stefana lives in Rovereto, which is a small town here nearby Trento. He spends every day 2 hours using trains and buses, time which is completely wasted playing Candy Crush. So we tried to find some way to get use out of this time. We developed a mobile crowdsourcing platform, Crowd Cafe, where people using their smartphones perform simple micro tasks such as taking images in exchange for tangible rewards such as coffee at a bar, bus tickets, or Amazon credits. So all of us here are potential customers of Crowd Cafe. Researchers use it to get participants for their user studies. Businesses classify their products and do some other important tasks with it. So currently we have 800 people performing tasks on Crowd Cafe from 11 countries. Also we have our first paid customer which uses Crowd Cafe to optimize their marble selling business. So now Stefana do not waste time anymore and he playing with performing tasks on Crowd Cafe and earn enough to cover his bus ticket, to get a free coffee, and Crowd Cafe gets a percentage out of it. So stop wasting your time with CrowdCafe. Go to crowdcafe.io and get some useful rewards with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavel. Thank you. Questions or interactions? Yes, Vitaly.
How do you differentiate from Crowdflower and Mechanical Turk?
Wonderful question. So actually, just to give you some context, I did my internship at Crowdflower. And so originally, if you look on what kind of people actually working on platforms like Mechanical Turk or Crowdflower, in order to perform tasks, you need to have your working environment established. You need to have your laptop somehow. And we were thinking, actually, lots of us here, we like spend some time in a bus, in a train. We might spend some time in a grocery store, in a line, and so on. So during this time, we cannot do much, but still we have our smartphone. And with this smartphone, we can not just waste your time, but we can do useful things, such as performing microtasks on CrowdCafe. That's the main idea, let's say, behind.
Bindi? Yeah.
Give me an example of a microtask.
Sure.
Do on the phone.
Yeah. Sure, wonderful question. So right now, for example, with our customer from Turin, what we do, actually this company has big marble blocks, and they do 360 images of this block, and they need to do some processing of this image. So what people actually do on their smartphones, they just cut this out of this image, of the whole image, the shape of the marble block to remove later on the background and create a 3D model and so on. Also, you can do, for example, tag images. If you, for example, Amazon, we can classify your products and do some other things. So actually, other startups can use CrowdCafe for providing things like some extra services which are impossible to do with the regular automatic stuff, such as, for example, you can just make images of your food, and this image goes to CrowdCafe, where people identify which food is it, and then we can automatically calculate calories, which you cannot do, automatically without humans right now.
So, I already put up the first slide for the first fire talk. It's actually a good slide to leave there because we need to remember the purpose of all this, right? So we're displaying what is this, what the local ecosystem is doing in order for getting feedback from the mentors. So the way now we give you some time to think about it. And also, if later on, at the end, we have some mix and you want to talk to the startups, if you have some idea of how they could develop or some contacts, that would be great if you can give them some feedback. Okay? So now we go on. We start with our first fire talk. It's going to be 10 minutes. And we asked our guests, our mentors, to condense in these 10 minutes a drop of their knowledge. Okay? So it's my pleasure to call on stage Micheal Geer. You have also the luxury of a clicker.
Yeah, so I'm going to go for about 5 minutes, and I'll cede my time back to the group. But yeah, a lot of times when I come around to these incubators, and really when I talk to anybody in tech, we get so caught up starting something that we forget, okay, well, why did I start it? We don't even think about those questions, we just start moving. And so I just want to run through a couple basic concepts that I think anybody in the group that's going to run a startup or is building one now should just spend a few minutes tonight thinking about. You don't need to get too, depressed or into it, but just to think about, take a few minutes to actually think about what your purpose is with this business. So there's two fundamental questions, right? The first one is about you. So why am I building my business? So why am I actually, what motivates me? The other one is about your customer or the person that you're building it for. So why does someone need my business? Not why does someone think my business is kind of cool, but why do they need my business? And so the first one, let's go through. These are some of my possible answers, but you probably have some others yourself. So why build my business? Okay, I want to change the world. So even from a young age, you see little babies that are like, they start touching stuff and they see that they can move something, and then they're just fascinated with that. They'll just move something for hours. But we actually continue doing that throughout our lives. Just as we get older, we're still fascinated by the fact that this little old us, can actually change the world around us. And I think part of that is a big motivation for entrepreneurs. Obviously, you can change the world for better or worse. Most of us, I would hope, and I think most people would say, at least, out in the open, that we're trying to change the world for the better. Another thing is, what we do in the world is we try to connect with people. So part of building our business is maybe we want to help the world, we want to make the world a better place, but that our real motivation is we actually want to connect with people, and that's what's driving everything. And then what's less said on stage and less said, in kind of PR stories of why we built these large startups is, okay, maybe I just wanted money, maybe I just wanted power, and that's generally okay. I mean, usually it's better if you have some other things built in, but if that's your motivation, and that's okay. And then I think what we actually see, and this is like a more prevalent one, especially in this really early stage that we're in with like the TechPeaks guys, is, okay, I just identified a problem and I know how to fix it, so I started building something that will fix it. Again, that's okay. It's probably not the strongest motivation, but that's I think if you think about it tonight, maybe that's why you started building what you did. And so the important thing that you realize when you go through, a lot of the guys that are here as mentors have gone through all stages, and a lot of you guys here are kind of early stage, is you realize that you really need to be fully motivated by what you're building. Because no matter how well it goes, some of us were more lucky and we took off over a couple months. Some of us were less lucky and we even failed, or it took us years to get to the point where our business was successful. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad weeks. And the only thing that's going to get you out of bed that morning to go back and keep fighting is if you're motivated, by why you're building this business. If you're not motivated by it, you're going to make it about 3 months, you're going to make it about 6 months, you're going to hit that tough time when you're running out of money, you don't know what to do, you're just going to fold. And so you kind of end up wasting that 6 months. So that's why I say, go home tonight, think about why you're building what you're building. Are you going to be motivated on that tough morning to actually go back in and keep fighting? Are you motivated enough? Do you have a purpose in your business? Okay. So again, this is just raising questions for you guys to think about. I have no answers. I'm sorry. This is just questions. Okay. So why does someone need my business? So again, when you're building a business, yeah, if you're solving some small little problem that people might have, it's okay. They might use it once, but you're going to have a very uphill battle getting any traction with your business. And so there's some really, again, this is just my list. There's probably like a ton of things that you guys could think of yourself. But you got to really kind of get to the heart of what drives human beings, what people want, what they need, not what they think is cool. And so, money, power, sex, health, the expression, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Health is a very powerful motivation for someone to use a product if they think it's going to give them better health. Recognition, posting something on Facebook, you're not going to post another photo if you don't get recognized for the fact that you posted that cool photo and you got 5 likes and 2 comments. Security, again, this is, in a bunch of these things, it's your security and probably your family's security. So these things kind of extend out to our loved ones and our families. Knowledge, just finding out about the world, getting back to like our fascination as a baby. Like we want to change the world, we want to push that block, we want to see that move, but we also want to learn about what's over that hill over there, what's happening in this other country. So knowledge is another kind of driver that makes people want and need your product. And so again, short list that I made up, you could probably think of other reasons. But if you're not, think about your product, think about what you're building. If you're not actually fulfilling one of these great needs of human beings, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have an uphill battle. And so you can either try to pivot what you're doing towards filling one of these needs, or just think deeply, like whether you're actually, hitting these main things. Because again, in 6 months, it's gonna be a tough 6 months, and you might give up. And think about it now, whether you're actually striking one of these. So that's it. I mean, if you don't answer these 2 questions now, it's much better to do it now than to do it in 6 months. It's much better to do it now than in a year. These questions are going to come to a head. You will have to answer these questions. You will have to think about them. So it's better to do it up front and not later on. So why am I building my business? Think about that tonight. Why does someone actually need my business? Like, how can they not live without your business? Think about that tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Do you want to make it interactive? We have 3 more minutes. Yeah?
I'll do a minute of questions. Anybody have a question about sure?
Okay, first one, yeah.
Hello. So what was your answer to the first question in case of Badu?
Sex. Oh, sorry. First question. Oh. My wife's in the crowd. I'll say no. No, I think the first one for me with Badu was actually just change the world. We wanted to create something that we could see actually have a ripple effect into the world. It wasn't necessarily completely altruistic. It was just like, can we build something that millions of people will use? That was our motivation. In the beginning, it probably changed over time, but that's what kept us going in the beginning, which is usually the hardest time.
2 minutes, another one. Last one.
I didn't see time on the list answers for your second question. Why?
Yeah, actually, that's a very, very good question. Saving time, I've seen with a lot of projects, just really does not. People don't feel that they need to save time. I mean, it's a general concept that they have, but they don't pay for saving time. They don't. It's a weaker of the drives. They want to save money. Saving time is usually not a driver. It's not a strong driver, I should say. It's a continuum, right? There's like a list of 100 things. Time is just simply in the middle of the list instead of the top of the list. And so the higher you focus up that list, you're going to have an easier time.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Okay. So next on stage, and I'm preparing very quickly. Voila. We're ready to welcome Sean Ammirati.
All right, so how many of you read Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup? All right, how many of you read Steve Lang's Startup Owner's Manual? Good. So I should say before I start this talk that that's pretty common, and I am a huge fan of both those guys' work. In addition to being a VC, I'm an adjunct faculty at Carnegie Mellon, and I teach the Lean Entrepreneurship course at Carnegie Mellon. So I really, really appreciate what those guys have done. I think probably the most powerful thing both those guys have done is added vocabulary to things that great entrepreneurs have been doing for a long time, so that you can have conversations with entrepreneurs and mentors much faster, right? So these are terms like pivot and a lot of the agile terms. But I think one of the terms that has gotten misused a lot is MVP, right? So MVP, for those of you who haven't read the book, is this concept of your minimally viable product. And just to back up for a moment, this is basically the Lean Startup in 20 seconds for those of you who haven't read the book. It's basically applying the scientific method to building your business. So you build some things to test some hypotheses, you measure how effective those hypotheses are, you learn from the measurements you do, and you build something else. And what you build is your minimally viable product. And this is the definition of your minimally viable product from the book that looked like 90% of the room had read. It's the version of a new product or service which allows the team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least amount of effort. Now, keywords here are maximum amount of validated learning about customers with least amount of effort. Interestingly, I've seen people use this term, this MVP term, to mean a lot of other things. I'm going to talk about 5 things quickly in the next 8 minutes that are examples of people misusing MVPs. So, first one, viable does not mean crappy, right? So a lot of people talk about their minimally viable product, and what they really mean is their minimally crappy product. And the problem with building a crappy MVP is that you end up with no validated learning, right? So if you build an MVP that looks bad and people don't use it, you don't know if they didn't use it because it looked bad and it was hard to use, or they don't use it because they're not interested in what you're building. But I see this all the time. Entrepreneurs come in, here's my MVP, it's this awesome landing page, and you look at it and it's like, well, it's black text on a white background, Arial 12-point font. And they're like, well, nobody's opted into the landing page. Well, sure, because it looked terrible and nobody wanted to be associated with it, right? Best example probably was 2 years ago in Lisbon, actually, with Evan. We had a company building a landing page for a wedding planning tool. And for those of you who've been married, you remember that like when you get married, you have to, talk about what color tissue paper should go into your wedding invitation for a couple hours. And the landing page was white background, black font, and paragraphs of text. Right? The opt-in rate in that case doesn't matter at all. So don't build crappy products. Build little amounts of products really well. We use the term actually at Birchmere, minimally awesome product instead of minimally viable product, just to try to break the cognitive load of viable means crappy. The next one is it's not a destination. So people will come to me all the time and they'll say, hey, if you give me $200,000, I can build my MVP. Right? That kind of breaks the whole build, measure, learn cycle. That would be like build once, measure, and learn. Right? The idea is that you're doing this iteratively over time, and you should measure and learn each time. I encourage our entrepreneurs to use a map like this when they're talking about their businesses. You can see we sort of applied map instead of MVP here, but for the rest of the world, this would be MVP number 1, 2, and 3. So you talk about what you're going to build first, what interaction your customers are going to have with that, what they're going to learn, and hopefully very little amount of money from that learning. If it goes well, you can build more things, continue to iterate, and maximize the amount of learning each step through the process. So it's not a build once, measure and learn. It's a build, measure, learn over and over again. Right? So this is an iterative process, not a destination. Number 3 is it validates or invalidates key hypotheses about your business. So often today, even in some of the mentor sessions, I would ask the company, so they would talk to me for minutes about what they were building. They were going to build this really great MVP, this really great product. And then I'd say, well, what are you going to learn when you're done building that? And it was like, it was a much harder question than that should have been to answer, right? So the idea is don't just build stuff to show that what you're building can be built. You actually want to make sure that when you're done building something, you're actually going to learn something about your customers or learn something about your business that is meaningful for you, not just have proven that you can build something cool. That's sort of the whole antithesis of the book. Next one is it doesn't have to be a product at all, right? So a lot of people will talk about their MVP and think, okay, I got to open up my code environment and start programming my minimally viable product, right? A lot of the most powerful MVPs early on, or MVPs early on, are setting up a landing page, doing some pay-per-click advertising to send some traffic to that, testing different benefits, and seeing what the conversion rate is on that, so you can get a sense what should the priority order of my features be. Sometimes it's literally taking colored pencils and drawing on paper what you're going to build and sitting down with people and watching them interact with that. You can do a lot of discovery about, hey, would people actually be interested in this before you've written any code. You can actually simulate it with like a paper prototype. I've actually had startups get customers, and I think there's one company that's here in TechPeaks right now that has people paying them for the product they're building before they build it, right? You can often do that by just showing people wireframes of what the product would look like and then see if they would pay you for it. That's, a customer contract before you have a product is really good validated learning. The excellent set of learnings if you can get someone to write you a check or sign a letter of intent to pay you once you build it. Conversely, it's not always a landing page, right? So I'd say that people kind of tend to fall into one of two buckets here. Either they want to start building a lot of product right away, or they just think every time the right first minimally viable product is a landing page. Sometimes a landing page doesn't actually tell you that much about what you're doing. I would say a lot of our companies will end up using like the Wizard of Oz test early on, right? Where they'll actually have a person do the work that their software is going to do over time. But it's hard to simulate some of those via landing page, so maybe you actually need to have people involved. So don't just assume that, going back to this chart, don't assume that these 3 steps, by the way, are the right 3 steps for your business. Each step of the way, you should pick the right next thing to build to validate the right next point in your process, and it's not always a landing page first. So those are my 5. So I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, John. Where's the other mic? Yeah, it's already going. Is it already going? Yeah.
Okay, so in which moment of the process, or these 3, if we consider, let's say we're going to do the 3 MVPs or experiments, in which stage you should start asking for investment?
Yeah, I mean, as late in the process as you can is probably the easiest answer, right? Because the business is significantly more valuable each time you go through one of these. I think when it comes to raising money, the right way to think about it is you should go as far as you can on as little capital as possible. And then once you need to raise capital, you should raise enough money to get through as many of these iterations as you can before you need to raise money again. So one of the things to think about is each of the iterations through here is basically a pivot, right? And you want to think you want to go as far as you can before raising money, and then you want to raise enough money to do enough pivots that you're sure the next time you go out to raise money, your business will be significantly more valuable than it is today.
Another question. We have time. Yes.
One question about what do you do when you're dealing with a market which is so conservative, but basically your MVP is not so big, because people are not even going to talk to you unless you have something kind of concrete which requires a bit of investment to do that.
Yeah, so I think that there's probably 2 answers to that question, unfortunately. So one is, I intentionally didn't put dollar figures in here because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer for entrepreneurs. I think it's part of what you're getting at, right? So the goal is you should be spending less early on to validate as much as you can before you need to spend more to scale these businesses up. The other thing, though, is I'd say that most entrepreneurs, myself included, when I ran startups, took these sort of ask for forgiveness, not permission philosophy for a lot of these things. And so you often can get a lot of validated learning without necessarily needing to get permission from the industries early on. So a personal example is the first business that I started and sold, we did a lot of work with traders on Wall Street, which is a pretty conservative industry, and we were able to do a lot of things sort of without permission to validate our software worked before we started deploying it in Vanguard and Fidelity and larger banks. So I think there are things you can probably do. I don't know enough about the grocery industry to be able to give you a good example for your case, but I suspect there are probably morally equivalent approaches for you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Ammirati. So it doesn't need an introduction, further introduction for a lot of you, but all right, are we doing it down? Yes. Okay. So now on stage we have our first panel. It's the title may need an explanation for some of you, which will be given, I guess.
I'll take it from there. How's that? Right. You have a slide up there?
Yeah.
Oh, Fausto's around. Welcome, Fausto. So my name is Evan Nisselson. For those of you who don't know me, a mentor here and a small fund called LDB Capital. I am happy to be the moderator tonight, and we're going to talk about one subject now and then another subject later on in the evening. The first subject is going global, which is actually a new word that I just learned. It's a combination of global and local. And I want to invite up our panelists, and then we're going to talk more about that. So first up, Bindi, Karia, Silicon Valley Bank. Did I pronounce your last name correct after all those years? Karia. Come on up, Bindi, from Silicon Valley Bank, previously from Microsoft. So Bindi's a great friend, and I don't think there's anybody that has helped European ecosystem more than Bindi, previously at Microsoft, this far, now at Silicon Valley, in many locations around Europe. So we're happy to have you. Thanks. Next is Michele Michelini from the local province, Hild, Department of Economic Development, and we're honored to have you here tonight, Michele. Thank you very much, and for all your support with TechPeaks in the region. We're going to talk more about that. And Vitaly, Golomb, come on up. You've already heard about CEO of a startup in Silicon Valley, and also, as mentioned by Paolo earlier, from the Ukraine and lives in Silicon Valley, but works a lot with the local ecosystem there in Ukraine. I went to one of his conferences, and also he's part of an accelerator in the Ukraine. So that was, are you going to tell us more? You're on the board, a part of, meaning you collaborate with them, right? And so the subject we want to talk about is growing startups from regional ecosystems. So it's an obvious topic here. Do we have the other mic, which is over here for them? It's there. Can you pass it to one of these guys? Great. So really, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the risks in growing regional ecosystems? And I want to start off with Bindi. Okay. And we're going to have interactive conversation. If you have questions for each other, please. If you have questions for me, make fun of me, do anything you want, and we'll take it away. So Bindi, previously at Microsoft and now at SVB, you've worked with a lot of ecosystems. You've seen some succeed and fail. Tell us an example or two of ones that are doing well and why.
So I'm going to start a little bit more theoretical. And we used to call it, back when I was at Microsoft, the local innovation economy. And we felt there had to be 4 or 5 parts working together in order to make that local economy work. So obviously the first one is startups and the entrepreneurs themselves. Second one, we would say the investors, and that would be angels through seed funds through to VCs. Third would be actually government involvement. Fourth, we actually said universities and academics, so what's going on here in Trento is a great example. And then the fifth were actually the corporates. And believe it or not, the corporates do make a difference as well in that ecosystem. So sort of all 5 of those combining together that leads to either a successful or not so successful ecosystem. So London, I've been in London for a very long time. Sort of giving away my age, I was there the first time. So in 2000, I worked at PwC Incubator, and yeah, that took a pretty big bath. Like every company failed, and then everybody was sacked from there, and I ended up in a startup. So I survived through to the next round, where I think in London, 2008, things started to kick off again. And I think the interesting thing is some of the best companies and best entrepreneurs come out of recessions. Microsoft founded during a recession. Google founded during a recession. And some of the great companies right now have been founded sort of 2008 and during that period of time. And then if you think about London as an ecosystem, corporates started to join in terms of building startup programs. There are a ton of entrepreneurs and local communities building up. I would say things like Launch 48 and Startup Weekend, really promoting the cause of entrepreneurship. In terms of government, number 10 and Boris in London, Mayor Boris in London, really started to give support and advice and impact. And now, even in London, the royals are involved. So about 3 weeks ago, or maybe it was about a month ago, they invited 200 people in tech to come to the palace and meet the Queen. So it's actually getting that kind of level involved. More and more corporates are involved in terms of, for example, things like Google Campus in London. Every day there's a new incubator launching. Every day there's a new seed fund launching. And And then I think it's just a combination of that really has grown to make London working together and being one of the better ecosystems in Europe.
But so quickly, so there's a ton of, there's a couple cycles that you've seen in Europe and London, and some have failed and some have succeeded out of those. So each time there's a cycle, there's many that join and a couple that continue. What is it for those couple that succeed and continue?
I'm going to be like a banker here, and the best business.
You are a banker.
Yeah, I am. I've only been 18 months in, so I'm still learning. So I'm still a software person in my heart. I would say the best companies succeed no matter what. So the best business models, the best products, the one that get the most traction, run by the most commercial people who execute and deliver. It doesn't matter when they're founded or if others fail, those are the ones that will always get through. No matter what, they're going to get the funding. And the money chases if people have a good product. It doesn't matter beyond that. It's kind of simple in my view.
Okay. Michele, can you tell us a little bit about your view in what you would love to see from businesses in the ecosystem? And then we can talk a little bit more about the fantastic projects that are happening here in Trento.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to see a lot of success. I would like to see your success and business success. I would like you to be rich with your business. I would like to see revenues. I would like to see employment. I would like to see taxes paid on this territory. I would like to see an economic system that grows. And the problem is that it's a few years that I don't see these kind of things. So we are all trying to do something different. Public tries to fund next funds or from to give financial grants in a different way. Companies, the research centers try to do something different. Trento Rise is trying to do a different way to grow up in the startups here in Trentino. The point is that here you have a different way to grow up startups. This organization is called People Accelerate. It's something different, something strange. You can think that I'm a public servant. Okay? Someone came to me and said, "We are People Accelerate." I said, "What?" And which is the best way you can finance this kind of startups? Because we are doing some jobs, we are doing something to help these young people, women trying to do business. And how can we help them grow? And I said, public funds has rules, strict rules in Italy, and they are not the best way to help startups, companies to grow. So we are thinking differently now. We are thinking that the best way to help you to grow is to match public funds with private funds, credit funds and private equity funds. If we find a good way, the right way to put together these three kinds of funds, maybe we find a solution. But the point is, first you have to have good ideas, because good ideas find money. But good ideas without money don't go anywhere.
That's great. So when you mentioned a couple of examples, jobs, taxes, money, businesses. Is there one of those that is the most important? I mean, the most for success, for understanding, is it jobs or is it money?
They are connected.
I understand, but if you put them in order, what would be the top? Okay, so jobs. And so one of the things I want to know, because I want to hear your thoughts as well, a lot of ecosystems, so Startup Chile and a bunch of others, and you're a mentor in about 5 accelerators. Some are local, regional, some are global. And it's become a fact that the technology industry is one of the most vibrant in creating jobs. how have you seen Ukraine, and or one of the other accelerators that you're working with, relating to helping the ecosystem with job employment?
So coincidentally on the topic, I wrote my first guest column for TechCrunch, and it went live on 4th of July, and it was mostly about how the U.S. government built Silicon Valley, essentially, with the programs with standards involved with Stanford. So you can look it up and you can read it, but basically, U.S. government did 2-to-1 matching to get the venture capital industry going in the 50s and 60s. In the 70s, lowered some tax rules, allowed retirement funds to invest in venture capital, and the industry multiplied by 10 overnight. And that kind of kicked it all off. In Ukraine, I can tell you, government's not involved at all. There's some bigger issues that the government's involved in right now, besides helping startups. But you can look at places like Russia and Skolkovo, and that's been mostly a little disaster because of corruption. So there's issues like that. If you look around the world, and in Silicon Valley, there's any day of the week, there's, you name it, 10, 20 different governments and different agencies from around the world coming to learn from Silicon Valley and how to replicate and create their own little Silicon Valley. And the biggest mistake usually happens is, well, we're going to go and learn and then copy Silicon Valley, but in reality, it should be the whatever valley that works best for that area, that uses the knowledge and the opportunities and the resources that that particular area offers, and kind of try to create the ecosystem there based on that. That's the biggest thing. And Silicon Valley is a magical place because that ecosystem is complete, right? 2/3 of the world's venture capital is on one street, smart lawyers that know how to do venture deals, angel investors that are mostly entrepreneurs that know how to see the future and connect the dots are there to support at a very early stage. And the biggest thing that's missing around the world is that risk capital that will come in really, really, really early when it's very uncertain to create that first group, that first cohort of investments so they have a chance to grow, and maybe 1 out of 10 of those will succeed, go to the next level, and get more money, etc.
So you mentioned a really good point, and it's a great timing for that article talking about how the government helped build Silicon Valley. But really quickly, before we pass it to Bindi, you said overnight. Overnight was really 20 years. It wasn't overnight, or 15 years. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Sure, yeah. The whole process started in the 50s with the government being the first customer to Silicon Valley.
Right.
But, and then the industry grew very, very, very slowly, and the risk capital started coming in from the East Coast to Silicon Valley. But then in the 70s, in actually a very short period of time, about 6 months, 2 things happened that the industry basically just took off.
Right, so it took 20 years
to get to that point.
To get to that point. Yeah. And it's not going to take that long potentially here, but it always takes time. And a lot of people hope that things happen overnight or within a political, 2 years or 1 year or within a startup or within 4 months of TechPeaks, but it all takes time. Bindi, you were going to mention something about that.
I sort of wanted to go deeper into what Vitaly was saying around sort of government working with the private sector, and just wanted to lay out a few examples where I've seen some form of success over time. One example, and many of you will know of them, is the Startup Bootcamp Accelerator. And their model is they're in around 10 cities in Europe. They get private investment, obviously, but they're also partnering with local government. So in Copenhagen, the Danish government's contributing. In Amsterdam, I know the Dutch government's contributing. And equally, you're getting angels contributing. In the UK, several kind of initiatives like that would be funds that are created. And these funds, the government will do something like, well, we'll commit £25 million if you can raise $25 million from the private sector. And you won't get that money unless you match it from the private sector. And so there's a lot of funds like that that exist. I think secondly, initiatives, for example, in London like Tech City, and what they're trying to do is take feedback from the private sector and entrepreneurs to really impact policies. So some great examples of that, they've actually been able to influence the entrepreneur visa in the UK, which means if you're a founder or entrepreneur, it's easier for you to get a visa and a work permit in the UK. Ditto for tax incentives. So again, the seed enterprise investment scheme, first 150K, if you make money back on it, is a tax write-off. So it's actually the private and public sector through these initiatives that are starting to make a difference and driving the jobs in the economy and the fuel and the innovation and the growth. But as you say, it takes time. I think London, this second round, they've been at it since 2008. I think they've got a long way to go, but it's getting there with time.
Michele, you mentioned earlier what you'd like to see from the businesses here. And part of TechPeaks is giving back to the community. Part of what I always talk about with entrepreneurs is the goal of helping somebody else without asking for something in return, like Silicon Valley does, and the rest of the world is doing that more and more. How can everybody here help you help the profits?
First, you should tell us what you need. No one is equal to the other, and depends on the needs of capital, on the needs of research and development, on the need of knowledge, on the need of market. The point is, in my opinion, that if you join the market with your products and your services, you will do the job. But that's easy to say and very difficult to do. I don't want to see you fail, because it's my fault. And the point is, when I use public money, I have a responsibility to the community. It's not your responsibility, it's my responsibility. And I have to be sure that what you are doing is the right thing for you. Because if you do the business, you do something that is good for the community. It is difficult from my point of view to understand if you're doing the right thing, but if there is a mentor, if there is a tutor, if there is a research center, if there is a bank, if there is a business angel, if there is someone else that believes in you and stay with you during this process, I can give you a place where you can work. I can help you in your process, in your business process. I can give you people to stay with you, and I can give you financial grants. If you are all responsible to this mission, and it's a social mission, I think we will find a way to grow up in a different way and to use public funds in a different way. The point is, I'm sure, Professor Giunchiglia knows that our ways to give you financial grants at the moment for startups are not useful enough, and we must try a different way to use them. Maybe we can learn from the USA, from England, from other countries, but we have to make an innovation in this way of helping and tutoring companies, startups in this. That's a challenge for us. It's not easy because the public administration has its roles, but we are trying to do that. And apart from that, we are trying to reserve financial resources for this goal. This is not something very easy at the moment. In Trentino too, we are in Italy, so we have some problems from the public point of view. But here in Trentino, the local government reserved always almost 20, 25, sometimes 30 or 50 million euro for innovation, research and development in this province. So the point is, can we reserve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million euro for startups? I think yes, we should do that with rules that are shared and accepted by the public administration and by the companies, by the banks, by the private investors. If we know the rules and we respect the rules, we can use a lot of public funds for that, because this territory is responsible to you and wants you to grow. we cannot accept unemployment of young people.
Right.
And we're trying to do anything we can to help you to make your business.
Right.
This is not a political message, it could be, but it's a technical way. I mean, this is my job. If you are not here, if you don't do your business, I use my job. So I mean, it's my interest to give you an opportunity to give it to a good business. But the point is, technically, it's not easy. Politically, it's easy to say, I want to help young people making business, but technically, it's not easy. If we work together, we can find a new way.
So that's the key. So working together, similar to what Bindi was saying, and what the successes of other ecosystems, everybody in the ecosystem has to work together and take chances and take risks. So Bindi and Orvi, you've worked with many different groups. How can regional ecosystems, these smaller ones compared to Silicon Valley, and growing, how can they impact globally? Have you seen any examples of we talk a lot about, are examples of how local smaller ecosystems that are vibrant but maybe smaller have impacted the world?
So biggest issue that every other ecosystem besides Silicon Valley has is brain drain. The best and brightest want to and leave for Silicon Valley or London or...
People understand what brain drain means here? Is that clear? So just explain that for everybody.
So brain drain is basically the best brains go down the drain and escape from the local ecosystem. They kind of graduate and leave. They go to Silicon Valley. And I find myself constantly telling founders to not leave their local ecosystem because it's not good for them. If you raise 100,000 euros and you think you're going to get on a plane and you're going to go to the Startup Olympics in Silicon Valley, you're going to find yourself, if you're the biggest fish in this pond, you're going to be a very small fish in the Silicon Valley pond. I find myself using a lot of American euphemisms. You're going to be a tadpole, yes. So what my recommendation is use at least your local ecosystem as a laboratory. You're a lot more competitive here. You have a personal support system. It's very stressful. It's very difficult personally, emotionally, to start a startup, especially first time. So you need that support. You need that help to be around you, to support you mentally as you start this thing. You should come to Silicon Valley, visit, learn, spend a couple of weeks, come out once a year, twice a year, see what you can bring back with you, and understand what it looks like at the most competitive level. But be able to do that locally at the very first, and deploy these ideas, these interesting ideas locally, or if nothing else, then to test it and use your local environment as a lab before you start going to a bigger, go Europe, all of Europe, and then go global.
Let me just make a comment to that as well. I lived in Silicon Valley from 95 to 2003, and so everybody was going to Silicon Valley. And now I've been in New York for the last 4 or 5 years, and actually I've seen a trend of people leaving Silicon Valley and coming to New York or going to Europe. It's smaller percentages, but the reason is that there's other ecosystems, just to that point. And it depends on the businesses that you're doing. You should be where your customers are. If you're selling to Italian olive tree producers for olive oil, you don't need to go to Silicon Valley. You go to Sicily, or you go to somewhere that, Greece, somewhere else that is focused on those customers. You have an example.
This is quite grassroots, but to me, this is the ultimate example of local. And I'm talking about Up Global and what was known as Startup Weekend. And just sort of disclaimer, I'm on the board of trustees for Europe, so I've spent a lot of time with the organization. And what is amazing is this is a global movement for entrepreneurship. So how many of you have run startup weekends, been in startup weekends, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so case in point. I went to the Global Summit in downtown Vegas in May, it was end of May. Adrian, when was it? End of May. Anyway, it was incredible. We had 75 countries, 550 people, all championing entrepreneurship in their local territories. And amazing stories, like people that have run startup weekends behind the wall on the Gaza Strip, and people that have run startup weekends in Syria, because you know why? They feel entrepreneurship is going to change their country. And it's an absolute awesome movement. And what's been happening is it started locally in Seattle. It's become a global movement. They've merged with Startup America. In Europe, they're actually funded by Startup Europe. So the big grant has been given by the European Commission to the European team, which happens to be based in London. But it is truly local. And what they're doing is trying to get locally grown entrepreneurs to grow locally grown businesses and create innovation in local economies. Some of these companies are starting to grow really big. Yeah, so some of them are starting. I can only talk about one or two from London. Oh God, what is their name? Two ladies. They've just closed a Series A of about 3 million. They invented this product. It's actually just a fan product, and they've got one direction, but One Direction, for example, or Cheryl Cole, and it's a fan platform. And they invented it over a weekend, and now the VCs are taking notice because they're getting millions of users on their platform, and it's now another button. And so there's the Google+, the Facebook, the Twitter, and now this button's coming in. And they built that over a weekend 3 years ago. And now proper businesses are starting, and they're in London because all their traction is there.
That's great.
So it's a good example.
So we've got about 5 minutes more. I've got plenty of questions, but interactive. Anybody in the audience have questions? Yes?
Thank you. I'm Alan. I've got one question, probably the best follow-up to what Vitaly was saying. You were saying that local governments come to Silicon Valley to teach and to copy Silicon Valley around the world. I think, as I think many of you will agree, that also Europe is desperately trying to build its own Silicon Valley. Don't you think that the biggest problem in Europe, that, for example, Russia or South America doesn't have, is that we have 28 different languages, and if a product wants to grow, they need to be Spanish, Italian, German, Slovak, Russian, whatever?
So, RUMNet, Russian internet, is second biggest in Europe, 200 million speakers, beat Germany about a year and a half ago, the German. But there's other issues now. Basically, Russia wants to put up a wall between its internet and everybody else, which is stupid. That's not the issue. The issue that everybody, even other parts of the US, are trying to work out is that manufacturing is largely gone to China, to where cost of living is a lot cheaper, cost of manufacturing is a lot cheaper. 90% of US physical manufacturing left in the last 15 years out of the country, right? Besides some car manufacturing and some other things. Germany is okay in Europe, but everybody else is losing that aspect as well. And what can stay local is intellectual property development. And that's what everybody's desperately trying to do. And Silicon Valley is, it's been in software for the last 20 plus, say 30 years. And is set up for that. Everybody else is trying to start it from nothing. So I don't think language is a big challenge, because you can, it's a challenge, sure, but if you have a fast growing business, localizing for different languages doesn't cost that much, right? Opening up additional offices. If you win, look at Israeli startups. Israel, tiny little country surrounded by enemies, second only after the US in number of public companies on NASDAQ is Israel. With 7 million population. So every time somebody tells me, well, our population is too small for it to be an interesting business, I point, look at Israel, right?
Next question.
I have one question. You were talking about the 5 players to build an ecosystem. And my question is, everyone has been trying in the last years to build a new Silicon Valley, India, and people are, they try and they fail. And I think I would like to ask your opinion. That one main point is that they didn't start from the need of the territory, the local, to answer the local need. So to try to develop, starting from the local, answering the local question, internal business. What do you think about that?
So I actually don't disagree. So for example, looking at cities like...
A successful example is Israel. They started from answering the question about the military or whatever, security, business.
So I actually don't disagree. So London, case in point. What is London good at? And where have they been growing? They've been growing in fintech. They've been growing in ad and media tech. They've been growing in fashion tech. Actually, hardware is having a big resurgence because design in London is huge. So what London is becoming really good at and world class at is focusing on what they're good at and where the best skill sets are. So I wouldn't disagree. Berlin, you're seeing a lot more hardware. In the Nordics, in Finland, you're seeing mobile. And now that all the Nokia engineers are let loose and free, just the stuff that's going on out of Helsinki is insane. Like, there's some great stuff happening. So I think people are playing to their strengths, and they're becoming global leaders, in my observation.
So one thing I'd add to that before we have also time for another question is, several of the ones that failed, most all new initiatives fail the first time. And there's no foundation. And then over time, if they've got the DNA or they're solving a problem or there is an opportunity, then they try again in the next cycle. So similar is New York again, even though the example Silicon Valley, historically, before 10 years ago, it was number 1 was Silicon Valley and 2 was Boston, mostly because of the universities. Okay? New York City has now become number 2 in the United States. So there is movement, but the first cycle failed in the late 90s.
But New York is strong.
And that's okay. Yeah. Exactly. So media, exactly. So exactly. So what I was getting at is there's certain business verticals, the fintech, the media, the advertising. The startups are being built there. So Israel for the military, it was a need. Other countries in Europe, there might be many different verticals here in Italy, I'm sure. Art, fashion, design, food, and others. It will happen, but it takes iterations, just like startups. The ecosystems are the same way. Peter, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just got an email literally yesterday from a new accelerator in Bordeaux, France, and their mission is, I can't do it. Yeah, everybody's in. And they're focused on wine tech and food and hospitality, and they're trampling through the strength. But you don't have to look that far. LA is kind of a growing scene, Los Angeles, Southern California, and you see a lot of media and content and entertainment startups that are better in LA than they are in Silicon Valley, where it's a bunch of geeks and it's technology. Right? But you see the difference between MySpace and Facebook. MySpace was Los Angeles. Facebook is Silicon Valley.
One more question. Anybody from the audience?
Short question.
One more short question. I'm going to reiterate this for those that don't know me. If you don't ask questions that are smart and don't raise your hand, we don't know who you are. So you can't get the impression of the investors that are in the room. So let me try this again. Who has a short question? You all fail. Okay. We're done. Thank you, panelists, very much.
Thank you to our panelists. So we've learned a lot about the ecosystem and how to speed it up. Work verticals and how to specialize. We would need to speed up also our projectors to each other. Coming? Yes. Right. So to speed up the local ecosystem, that's where we started from when we designed TechPeaks. You've heard it mentioned a few times until now, and I'm gonna say like in less than 2 minutes what we are doing. So TechPeaks is a local accelerator. We take people, not only businesses and teams. So also people who don't have a business idea can come to TechPeaks. We have launched the second round back in March, and we're going to have a demo day next week, July 18th. So these are some numbers. We got over 600 applications this year. We drove that down to 47 participants coming from 14 different countries. In the world to Trento.
And the average age for people who are asking, well, are these students? No, well, average age is 29, ranging from a country member in the early 20s to a country member in the 40s. Unfortunately, and that was a point that has been addressed also recently, and it is being addressed by many researchers in the field, only 10% of the participants are women, and also that was the percentage we got in the applications. So for all women entrepreneurs out there, and for all of your friends who are women and are working in the sector of entrepreneurship, digital entrepreneurship, it's called to raise their heads and their voice and come and apply to TechPeaks and other populating the scene everywhere. In this current round, we have 21 initiatives that are active right now. Many more have been created. I counted over 30 years that 30 ideas that have been explored. 38% of those 21 initiatives actually were more or less started here. Some people had already their ideas. Some actually created, came out with ideas here at TechPeaks. About 33% of companies that came here improved their team, so got a new co-founder, maybe a co-founder left, they got another one on the team. So there was a lot of experimental change going on this year in TechPeaks. And 23% of the initiatives have actually a link to research that is developed here in the region. As I said, TechPeaks started with the idea of helping boosting the local ecosystem. We did many actions. Then one that I want to recognize here that we did, all with help of Trentino Sviluppo, and to develop this network of partners that we have on the local ecosystem. So you may recognize some of the companies that actually pitched earlier on, like University of Trento and APIAE as research centers, and others there. These are some of the logos because we had 48 applications to be partners of TechPeaks this year. We selected 31 partners, over 1,500 hours of help from TechPeakers have been delivered to the territory, this program, and here I want to give a round of applause to the TechPeakers who did this. So we estimated that was over 1 work week per TechPeaker, fully that was delivered 36, 38 hours each. And these are the breakdowns. So 500 hours were delivered in helping the local businesses or the local initiatives to get better at the business and marketing. About 700 hours in innovation for information technology, and over 250 hours for education with students. Yeah. So with that, I'm finished. And I'll call now for 2 more fire talks to wake us up. So first to go is Renaud Visage. Renaud Visage!
Are you all sleepy?
No.
No?
No! Yeah, Renaud!
So to follow on the Glocal topic, I thought I would share some of the lessons that we learned as we scaled our company. We started a company in 2006 in Silicon Valley, and over the years we've grown to, I'll show you some numbers to illustrate. We've had 1 million events in 187 countries just last year. We started from pretty much zero in 2006. We sold 58 million tickets last year. That was in pounds. and we now have 375 employees and 4 continents. So we had to scale the business, not only the business, but also the company. We have people all over the place nowadays. We have to do Google Hangouts all the time because nobody is in the same room anymore. So it was a big change for the company. But most importantly, I think you all will have to go through some sort of globalization at some point if you start to be successful. Most of the European ecosystems markets are too small for most successful startups, and you have to expand beyond your borders. So I thought I would share some of the lessons that we learned. We launched our first international sites in 2011. There was our .co.uk domain, so it was 5 years after we started. London was already our third biggest city in terms of ticket sales after San Francisco and New York. So we had a big incentive to be in the UK. And by mid-2012, we had launched in 14 different countries in 7 languages. So we did a very rapid deployment of different sites in different languages. We launched .it, I think the last one was June 2012. But we haven't launched anything else since. So we've had to rethink our global strategy in that period between 2011 and now. And I'll share some of the lessons around. First of all, there's many paths you can take. There's many roads, there's many countries, many markets, many partners you can work with. There's many ways you can do it internally. So you have to pick the right path. But the problem is that there's no right path. There's only the path you take. And you have to make an informed decision about why you're taking that path. And I think that's what we learned throughout the years, that you have to come up with that recipe book that makes it possible for you to scale and be able to predict how you're going to scale. So that's what we started doing about a year ago, coming up with a playbook that can be, it's a bit like building an MVP each time and experimenting and learning and building that playbook as you do experiments in different countries. So, for example, we had an Irish site that we launched in 2012, but we didn't really do much with it. So about 6 months ago, we said we're going to do the exercise of relaunching. We did PR campaigns, we did SEM, we did a whole bunch of different things. And each time we measured the impact that it had on our traction, on how many new organizers we were able to attract to the site, how they were converting, etc., etc. With the idea that experimenting on that smallish market, Ireland only has 4 million people, we would be able to learn a lot of things that would be useful for many other markets, bigger markets potentially. The goal of the playbook was to build a repeatable way to multiply your core markets. So you'll have success in one place at the beginning. It might be Italy, it might be London, whatever your first experimental location is. And this will become your core market. And what you need eventually to scale is to multiply these core markets and grow them to the full potential that they have for each one. And that's a really hard task to do. What we did in 2011-2012 was testing a wide net over pretty much all of Western Europe, hoping that one of them would evolve and become our next core market. We had the UK that was clear it was going to become a core market. It is a core market now. But none of the other countries, we didn't know which one would take off, so we just thought we would just launch all of these and see which ones would. In the end, none of them really took off. Like, we had good growth, decent growth, but not to the full potential that we think we can have in each of these countries. So that's why we set out to build this process. First of all, you have to ask yourself, are you ready for this? Because it's a big journey. It's going to complicate a lot of things: internals, accountings, company structure, dealing with translators, dealing with translations, making it all automated, all the things you have to do to scale. So are you ready? Do you have enough people? Do you have enough capital? Capital, don't break the bank. Make sure you don't have to go see Bindi for a loan. Make sure you have raised enough, and that you can predict the next couple of years that you'll have enough to fund your new efforts. You have to pick wisely. There's many options out there, so think hard, do your research, make a lot of contacts locally, figure out which are the best options for you to expand and how you're going to go about it. In the pre-launch process, we gathered intelligence on every single market, on all our competitors. We tried to figure out what numbers could predict our growth in different countries. We found out that poverty, for example, correlated pretty well in our potential success in different countries so far, and we thought we could use that and many other numbers. That's pretty important, I think. Not enough companies spend enough time gathering intelligence on the different places they can expand into. Establish contact with the locals, go travel around, meet people. If you go to 18 countries a year, meeting people, it's also with the goal of establishing your global network, so that when you are ready to expand in Turkey or Russia or whatever, you already have some level of correspondence with people who have been successful in this market that can establish the links you will need to set up shop, to get the permits, find the lawyers, etc., all the things you'll need to expand. Each market is different. You can have a product that has mass appeal, or WhatsApp that's used everywhere, Facebook that's pretty common, but a lot of these markets, especially for e-commerce, have very specific rules. Marketplaces are regulated differently in different places, security, confidentiality, privacy laws. There's many different specificities to each market, so understand what impact it's gonna have on your business and be prepared for that. And when you're ready, go for it. But go for it for the long term. You can run as many experiments you want until then, but once you're ready and fully committed, it's going to take a while for you to know if you're successful in that market or not. So don't just go in and pull out after 6 months because you didn't predict that it would be so time-consuming and effort-consuming for your team. Preparing for the launch is critical. You have to write the right team in place. Hiring takes much longer in Europe, for example, than in the US. Having the right team, training them, understanding the local laws, preparing the site as well, if you have the website, to prepare all this before you're ready to even think about going into that market. And then when you're ready, we found that sending people from the company was invaluable instead of hiring someone new to run the country. We are sending out top-level people, seed the market, find the right talent out there. It's a long commitment, usually 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, depends on the markets. We just sent someone in Melbourne, for example, to start Australia. We feel the company culture cannot be taught that fast, and it's very hard to know from day one if someone is going to be able to take that company culture and the DNA of your company and educate all the other employees and keep that momentum, that spirit that you have in your core office, and replicate that. Launch time is great. You have all this PR, hopefully, you have everything lined up, you have great traction in the beginning, very exciting, you start meeting people who have heard of you in the different countries you travel to. It's very rewarding. And then that doesn't stop. You have to constantly experiment, iterate, just like your MVP. It's like launching an MVP in different countries. For Germany, for example, we have to do a lot of custom work. Their payment options are very different from the rest of the world. They do a lot of direct debits. They do a lot of invoicing. We were not quite ready for that when we launched, but we're building all this so that we can go back to Germany and have a much more viable product for the market. And enjoy the ride. It's so fulfilling when you meet people all over the world and they tell you that they're users. And each time I go to a startup conference, a lot of the startups are actually users of our products. I'm very grateful, I think, for the tech ecosystem to have been the first users in many of the places we have expanded into. And I hope you get that same feeling of accomplishment when you travel around and people know your brand. That's all about creating a brand that's globally known. Thank you, and build your own playbook. I think that's pretty cool, even early on. You can't start early enough learning about what's going to make you potentially a global company at some point. Good luck.
So that was perfect. 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
One quick question. Very quick though.
How can you know when you're successful in one country or in another?
How can you know when it's success in a country?
Well, we have some numbers, we have curves, adoption curves. So if you look at most of the internet businesses, you get an S-curve of growth over time when you get to maturity and saturation of the market. So we track our trajectory along this curve and see where we are in each country compared to population and a lot of other indicators, and see how we trend compared to the other countries we've launched in previously. So we always track against the US to see if we're growing faster or not as fast, where we are on the curve. Thankfully, in most countries, we're right at the beginning of the curve, so we have a lot of upside, and we keep track of that pretty consistently.
All right, Renaud Visage, even right, we are heavy users. Okay, then the last player talk of the day, to wake us up again, like with a bit, it was a big wake up by Renaud, and so on stage now, Vitaly Golomb.
So for now is your dessert, I'm your digestif. So pitching like a boss. I tend to use a lot of American expressions. And I'm going to try to do this fast forward, because this usually is about a 45-minute talk on storytelling, entrepreneur storytelling. Pitching is storytelling with a hook, with a sales pitch at the end. So what is boss? It means confidence. And how do you get confidence in your presentation? You get it by knowing what you are talking about. I'm going to let that sink in. So a lot of people are shy, they're not professional presenters, they're not necessarily trained speakers, but you have to build a skill as an entrepreneur, because you're going to be telling your story to a lot of people. And you're going to have a lot of people that doubt you or question you, and you have to have confidence. You have to have control over the sales pitch. So who and why are you pitching? It's not just investors. The first people you're going to be pitching are your loved ones, your family, your wife, your husband, your parents, to let you do this crazy entrepreneur thing, right? And you're going to be practicing pitching on them. And it said that if you can convince somebody of your vision, then it's a vision. Otherwise, it's a hallucination. Right? That's your first pitch, is letting somebody that loves you do this crazy thing. Now, like I said, a pitch is a story with a hook, with a call to action. At the very end, there's an ask. You want them to do something. And there's several different kinds of pitches, right? So we'll go through them real quick. The first kind is the 90-second elevator pitch. You have 90 seconds, no slides, and what you're trying to do is just get the meeting, right? Big mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make is try to get all their knowledge, everything they know about their product, about their market, into 90 seconds. And they're talking somebody's ear off, and they just don't understand. They're going to remember one or two things. And remember, your call to action during this type of pitch is to just get the meeting. So get to the juicy part and create some mystery. Think about that. Now the next kind is the 3-minute public pitch. Right? This is the demo day pitch. I think the microphone's about to go out. Now here, you want to stand out and get the meeting. Switch around. There we go. So here, in this case, there's 21 companies. There's some investors in the room. Everybody's going to pick one or two companies that are interesting to them to then talk to later. So you want to stand out and get the meeting. That's the 2 calls to action. That's the only 2 things that you need to accomplish with that pitch. Now, if you're successful with the first or second pitch, that's where you get the 20-minute meeting. The 20-minute meeting is all about getting the deal. And you prepare 20 minutes because if you're good and it's interesting, then it's going to be an hour. It's going to be a conversation. Okay? Let's talk about content. A pitch is a very specific type of sales presentation. And a startup pitch has a very specific type of content in a very specific order. First things first, if you have traction, lead with traction. Nothing matters more than traction, up and to the right. If you have an existing business and you're growing and you have good numbers, you lead with that. That's how you capture interest. Because somebody that is not, they don't know your market, they don't know your industry, but they see amazing numbers, they're going to be interested to hear more. Right, Evan?
Right.
There you go. So if you have traction, lead with traction. That tells somebody right away that this is a real thing. It's not a concept. It's not something that you would like to do. It's something that you think will happen, but it's something that's real. And that's a very strong start. Next is the question. The two questions I've asked 8 or 9 of you today. Who's the customer and what's the problem? Before you start telling me about this technology, patent pending and this and that, and we're building this, I don't care. If it's not if there's no customer and there's no problem that you're solving, it is just a technology looking for a problem to solve, and that's very, very painful. So think about when you're starting your story, you want to tell a very painful story for a particular customer. It has to be a painkiller, not a vitamin. It has to be an obvious thing that somebody will spend money on, spend their time on, because they want the solution. It's something that changes their life in a big way. Not just incrementally, because incremental is very, very hard to sell, but a huge improvement, huge obvious improvement. How do you make it obvious? You show evidence. You make it really, really obvious. And you show evidence from things we trust. According to Gartner, according to whoever, this problem exists. And you back it up. You back it up by showing how this problem is currently being solved. The kiss of death is when you come up and say, we have no competitors. Well, guess what? You're probably not the smartest person in the world. Right? The odds are you're not. And if you're the only one that identified this problem, probably means that there's no problem. Now, the other mistake related to this is that people think that just because it's not being solved the exact same way, you have no competitors. Well, if it's a real problem, people are dealing with it some ways, some shape or form right now, right? It might be, with every technology paradigm, you have a different way, a more efficient way of solving the same problems over and over and over again, right? Before you did it on paper, then you did it on a computer, then you did it on the internet, then you do it on the smartphone in your pocket. The next paradigm will be probably wearable computing. And with each paradigm, technology paradigm, you get an opportunity to solve the same problem over and over and over again, okay? Think about that. Again, no competitors equals no problem equals no market. So think before you say we have no competitors. Now, if it is in fact being solved right now, is it hard, is it expensive, is it painful in some other way? How are you different and better? Again, don't just say, oh, we're different. Well, different and better? It's not interesting if it's just different. It has to be obviously better. Now, the solution. When you told me, here's the customer, here's the problem, here's how it's currently being solved but not adequately, well, now you can tell me what your solution is. Now I will better understand the context and it will make more sense. Right? Simple. Better, faster, cheaper, new. Explain to me how is it better and different. Different and better. And why is this important? If you're competing with somebody very strong, you will never beat them at their own game, at their own business. You have to come at it from the side. You have to flank it. It has to be a completely different approach because an existing business is built around their process, right? If you come up with a new way that's only possible now because you just started this business not 5 years ago or 10 years ago, then odds are that big existing business will not catch up to you, right? Number of features is not a competitive advantage, but a different approach to the market is. Now, once I know what it is, you do a mini demo. 1, 2, 3. So if you told me, here's what we do, this is here's how it works. 3 screenshots. Customer signs up, customer does this, they get that. Okay, now I get the business. Doesn't need to be a long video, it could be 3 screenshots. Simple, right? Now, when you've told me all that, who's the customer, what's the problem, how's it currently being solved, but not really, here's our solution, here's how it works, well, great. show me a big market, a $1 billion market. You don't have to go after it right now, but it has to be a big enough market to be interesting. Because odds are, if you're good, you're going to get a small piece of it. And that has to be a big enough business for investors to get their 10x, 20x, 100x. And it also helps if it's a growing market. Because if you come into a market and it's growing 20% a year, guess what? You're going to grow with it by doing not much. If it's a stagnant market, it's going to be very difficult for you to take market away from existing businesses that solve that problem. Now, business model is something you have to think about as well, right? And there's a couple of different kinds of business models. There's symmetric business models, where the customer that you're solving the problem for pays you. That's a typical B2B SaaS. We do this, they pay us $20 a month, everything is great. There's the asymmetric business model. This is Facebook, for example, that the customer or the user is the product because somebody else is paying for their experience, the advertisers. And you have to understand the dynamics of what motivates your customers and how much your solution is worth to them, and think about different business models that you can apply to that business. Now, with venture business and venture-based startups, not lifestyle businesses, it's very important that your business scales. What does that mean? You've probably heard it a million times. Well, scale is revenue per employee at full scale. So if you look at some of the best companies as far as that goes, you have on the one side, you have Craigslist, which is 3.6 million per employee, but they have 23 employees. And then you have McDonald's on the other side, 64,000 per employee, but they have 1.7 million employees. Somewhere in the middle is where you want to be, about $1 million per employee. This means two things. First of all, you have to do math, and you have to understand that at full size, if your business is somewhere in here, it can be that efficient, that's great. But it also means that if you come in and show projections to an investor and say, we're going to be the fastest growing business in the history of business, and we're going to make 100 million per employee, you're probably going to get laughed out of the room. Because that's a test to see if you're crazy, right? You have to do your homework, you have to understand what financial projections are all about. It's an exercise to see how you think about your business, right? We know, investors know that those projections are always wrong. It's just a question of which direction, up or down. But it has to be a believable story, right? Internet-driven distribution models are key in the last 10 years. This is a huge advantage. This is something that you can't ignore. This is something that you have to acknowledge as far as how your business is going to grow. How do you use social channels? How do you use online advertising? All these different tools to grow your business. And you have to understand how these numbers work in your business. Okay? And most importantly, especially very early on, where you don't have anything, you might have just an idea or just a prototype, is your team. That's the only thing that can be measured for quality, is say, is this team the right one to solve this problem, right? And it usually consists of 3 points that TechPeaks does a great job of showing. So first and foremost, a perfect startup team has business experience. They understand the problem that they're trying to solve better than the average smart person, better than the Stanford MBA that just came out and doesn't know the industry, right? Somebody with experience in that particular problem. The other thing is, of course, engineering. If you're building software, if you're building hardware, you need to be able to build it. You cannot come out and say, we're going to outsource everything to some shop. If for no other reason that maybe you have no money, and the first iteration you do, and you give a certain percentage of your company to build that prototype. Well, guess what? The prototype will almost certainly be completely wrong, and you're going to iterate 100 more times, right? So what are you going to do? Are you going to give away 5% every time you need to iterate your product? That's probably not going to work, right? So if software is your product, if hardware is your product, engineering and being able to build that product is your core competency, and you cannot outsource it. And today, design is the price of entry. People are so used to good design in products that, especially in mobile, you have 5 to 10 seconds when somebody downloads your app to actually get them to open it again. So the stat is, if you're good, you're going to get somebody to open that app again for the second time 50% of the time, if you're really good. If you're really bad, you have 10 seconds, they erase the app, and you'll never see them again. You have a lot of downloads, and you have no retention of users. That's all about design and usability. And now that's even going into the enterprise because, well, who's made up in the enterprise? It's humans that are used to using nice, convenient consumer applications, and now they expect the same experience in what they do all day, every day in business. And these choices get made based on the experience. Now, what is your competitive advantage? The hint is you want to be this guy, not this guy. The competitive advantage is not we're light in sumo wrestling. That competitive advantage early on is the fact that you should know that particular problem better than the average person. That's a huge competitive advantage. Because somebody else can build something, can design something, but knowing the problem better than anybody is very, very unique, very important. Now, of course, in the pitch, you're trying to sell. So this is not the time to be modest. This is when you want to talk about your accomplishments. If you have a big partnership with a company in the industry, you want to talk about it because that's validation. That means a big company that knows the problem, knows the industry, spends money, makes money in the industry, validated your idea, and they are behind it and they say this is worth our time and resources. Things like that. If you raise money, who you raise money from is very important as well. So think about who you take money from as well. Then ultimately, just keep calm and close the deal. Don't be desperate, don't beg, be confident. Remember that you don't necessarily need investors as an entrepreneur. You can do different things. You can go to Bindi and get a loan.
Probably not.
That's true, that's true. Probably not. They'll only give you a loan if you already have a pile of venture capital. But venture capitalists cannot live without entrepreneurs. But entrepreneurs can live without venture capitalists. So remember that. You are the product, or you're the revenue, they're the overhead. Remember that. Now, a couple of other things about your presentation. Your presentation, your slides, that's just for you to keep track of where you are. Most people are visual, they want to see pretty pictures. You notice I don't have any bullets or big paragraphs of text because you're either going to read the slides or you're going to listen to me. And I'm the show. Right? This is just helping me keep your attention. Remember that when you design your slides. Most people cannot read and listen to you at the same time, especially when you're on stage. And body language is crucial. There's a very famous speaking trainer, Jerry Wiseman, and he's famous by being able to analyze political debates on mute. You can mute, and you can watch political debate, and you see who's winning by body language. There's a few tricks that I'll leave you with. And they are the following. So, confident stance. That means you want to stand with your legs, your feet shoulder width apart. You don't want to do this, right? You don't want to do body wrap, things like this. So there's a parasympathetic response. When people are nervous on stage, they'll do two things. They'll either fight or they flight. They want to run away, right? When they pace on stage and do this, it's very nervous. When they dance around, right? A lot of people do this. Or they do body wrap, where they're trying to protect themselves. This is nervous too, right? And that makes the audience nervous. So you use open hand gestures. You don't point, right? Because that's people don't like that. But you extend your hand like you're going to shake somebody's hand, right? Very little easy tricks. Speak loud and clear, right? I'm using a microphone, but I can talk to you like this if the microphone fails, and you'll hear me just fine. You should be able to project to the back of the room. This is something that takes practice. And when you're on stage talking to a mic, you don't talk like this. You eat the mic. You eat the mic. Because nobody should be in the audience sitting there reading their email. They should be paying attention to you. Only talk to eyes. This is a thing that I noticed this morning. A lot of people do this. They read their slides with their ass to the audience. But what is this? This is a series of one-on-one conversations. You make eye contact with people, you give them a line. You make eye contact with people, you give them a line. Make sure they're listening to you. And you can do this in a room with 10 people, with 20 people, with 200 people, with 20,000 people. And then the audience feels that connection. It's also a trick to make you less nervous. Because if you're having one-on-one conversations, you're not going to fly through your speech. And you're going to be a lot more natural. You don't need to memorize anything. You're just talking about your little company to a friend that you met at a cocktail party. There's just 20,000 of them and they're right in front of you. That's okay. And last but not least, probably most important, smile. Nobody wants to see an angry or nervous person on stage because people get the same energy back. You smile, people smile, you nod, they all nod back. Yes. Very easy. You put people at ease and you're good to go. So thank you very much. If you want the slides, I'll post them.
Could I project my voice in any case without the mic?
Thank you, Vitaly. That was very useful, and it brings us to the fact that we had a pitch competition, and we're gonna announce the winner just after this panel. So I'm gonna call on stage again Evan Nisselson, who is behind me, right, for the next panel and last panel. Thank you.
While we get the chairs out, great presentation, thanks Vitaly and everybody else. But to reiterate something that he said, so when do you guys sell? What's the answer?
Always.
When?
Always.
When?
Always.
Always! You do that? Try it again. Always! Jesus Christ, wake up.
Yeah.
Next panel. You guys okay? Try it again. 1, 2, 3. Always! Now the blood's... Andy, I didn't hear you. Okay, so next panel. ICT panel. Investing in ICT, the opportunities for collaboration between universities, startups, and the ecosystem. I'm honored to invite up Fausto, our president of Trento Rise, and this whole fantastic initiative. Fausto, round of applause! All right, Andy Parson, serial CTO. He's a CTO at Happify and others, one of our mentors, a good friend and troublemaker. Hi, Andy. And Rumen, our partner from Launchhub, Accelerating Sophia, another mentor, and also friends. Okay, let's get it going. So, what do you want? You want things? You want me to talk louder? Ale? Oh, okay, sorry, he wasn't talking to me.
Projector.
The projector.
It's on your face.
Okay, so universities have incredible technology research initiatives. We all know that, all over the world. In Europe, they're a bit slower than in the States in collaborating with entrepreneurs and startups. However, that's increasing. Fausto and I talk about that all the time. I'd love to hear a little bit from you, Fausto, and we're going to get another mic over here. No, assistant's not very much. Just kidding. Give us a perspective, Fausto, of the biggest challenges right now between trying to get more researchers in universities and all startups, and a thought or two on how we can best do that in your market.
For the question of if we get more research at university startups?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very good question. Very hard.
I like giving you hard ones, but you can do it.
Yeah, I can try. So it's interesting because see, researchers are interested in understanding. Usually they have this dream of deep understanding. And in average, they're interested in money, not much. Not really. They're interested more in famous. While startups, rightly so, they are more interested in getting things done, getting money out of this. And sometimes this gets in the way of becoming deep, understanding problems. I mean, the distinction between problems and solutions, which was mentioned before, is key. Most of people confuse solutions with problems. So the game is really to do contamination. And that's the only way to do it. I mean, you get people to talk to one another, and you get to understand, to make your researchers understand that maybe what they're doing is interesting, not only because it's interesting, also because maybe used for something which is not their main goal. Vice versa, I think that when I see many startups or people who are interested in startups, I think that they need more depth in the technology, because that's where the competitive advantage is. Your competitive advantages are hardly easy to replicate what you're doing by someone else once you see the game. Once you find your niche where you can compete. And there is no other way that getting two totally different diversities together and getting to talk to understand each other. And by the way, making these two diversities to understand each other is almost mission impossible. But that's actually the meat is.
That's so excellent. It was a perfect lead-in to Andy, who's worked with many different types of developers and engineers and teams over the last years. Tell us a little bit about the difference between those that might be PhDs or researchers and coming into a company versus those that have not. And how have you seen the value in the past?
This is a little bit like entrapment because you're asking me to make broad generalizations, but I'm going to take the bait.
Yes.
There you go. So yeah, I've worked closely on very early stage companies with PhDs and university folks. Eat the mic. And I've worked with very technically savvy people who have limited or no university education. So here comes the generalization. And of course, it depends on individuals and personality and company and technology fit. I think Fausto's exactly correct. I think the research DNA is not about making money and doing things fast and sloppy. I think the entrepreneurial DNA, the self-trained Rails developer, what have you, is much more about doing things that are good enough and worrying about it later. Neither DNA pattern is exactly right for a successful company. I think you need a combination of the two. When I'm hiring engineers, I often ask myself, I've mentioned this to a couple of startups today, whether the management overhead of the individual engineer you're hiring is worth the output and the quality you're going to get from them expressed in software. And I find that neither extreme meets that low bar. The guy who wants to do things fast and doesn't have a solid university education interest in developing something truly new and innovative is not for me. The guy who's on the other end of the spectrum who's only interested in innovation and not interested in business is also not quite correct. So the trick in hiring and building strong teams is to find people who are kind of straight down the middle, and that's why it's very difficult to do that.
And so you're saying basically, it relates directly to the subject. You're investing in people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so which one is the better investment for your need?
Yeah. I will say the word contamination is, I love that, that's great. I think it is easier to contaminate a PhD or a research fellow with entrepreneurialism than it is to contaminate the other way. But that's one thing to keep in mind.
And we're in the contamination room, so that's all. Excellent. Rumen. So in your local regional ecosystem, there are. Tell us a little bit about how you see the universities in the local ecosystem relating to also what you see here.
Right. Well, we started 2012 actively investing, and we also had this question in our minds: how to support basically research universities to go and become a market opportunity that will develop a successful business. What we have figured out is that we do have plenty of PhDs in our portfolio companies, that's for sure. We have very successful dropouts from the PhD studies, so very successful in the portfolio. Unfortunately, in Eastern Europe, or at least in our region, there is a little bit different mindset. Again, I'm generalizing here. And the mindset also comes from the way the PhDs and the universities are used to receive funding. So basically, especially European money, right? European funding. So in their mind, generalizing, when they receive a funding for a given project, this is a success. You know, they're done. They're most of the next project. And in entrepreneurship, it's slightly different, right? So this mindset is something that I think prevents us from being very successfully funding lots of entrepreneurs, PhDs from our region. But on the contrary, we have plenty of PhDs coming from Slovenia, for example, which is quite surprising. But we do try to diversify. I mean, last week I was speaking with a team for PhDs, and the question was, is there anyone who is not PhD? And they have to think about this one.
It took him a little while to think about it. So investing, you're now investing. So when you look at different teams, what in your mind is the most important mix-up of a team building a business?
Well, team is the first thing we look at because we're early stage investors. So sometimes there is so much to look in terms of the product, right? The first thing you're faced with people. And the first thing, of course, that comes to our mind is, can they build it? I mean, is this the right team to build a solution? Because if you're planning to build something in technology, usually something sophisticated, because this is where the competitive advantage of the region is, basically. To have the engineers, to have the developers building sophisticated things. The first question is, can they build it? And then the second question is, can they sell it? Right? Because building a product is completely different from building a business. So we do try to sense if the team, if this is the right team, to move this from the idea or project to a business.
So what's the personality traits that you, and I want to hear all three of you say this from each of your perspectives, in building the type of people that you would like to invest in, whether or not you're investing as an investor, a CTO, or a professor, or even a CEO. Fausto, you wear many hats, so you can choose whichever one you want to discuss. What is the most important trait, and what is the worst trait for an entrepreneur? In one word answers. The personality.
They have to be very
one word.
Honest and straightforward from the beginning.
Honesty, no, and a negative, what's the worst in one word?
Well, being dishonest.
Okay, next.
One word. I think the critical trait I would have to say is just one word?
Yeah.
I use two?
No.
Curious.
Good word, curious. And negative? Don't take Rumen's easy way out. Do not take Rumen's easy way out.
Not sure that the one word. Slow.
Okay. So I was watching a very nice TEDx talk. Someone said, I have a dream. No one said, I have a plan. And actually, I think, yes, a dream. That to me is a key property. You must have something that he or she wants to do. Negative. You must be a follower. You just do whatever other people tell you to do.
And I would say passion is one, and selfish is another, is a negative. And the reason I keep on asking this is because I like to distill it down in very direct, simple ways, because we can talk for 5 or 6 hours. And like somebody said earlier that we're not going to remember everything, but we remember simplicity. So you guys have any questions for each other? And audience, remember my comment before, if anybody has questions, raise your hand so we can make this interactive. And once you raise your hand, I'll come right to you. If you guys have any questions for each other, or I have more questions to ask. Is there a hand went up? Okay, let's go. You guys can have time thinking about what question that's
Answering is easier than question.
I know, that's why I asked you to.
Yes, thanks. So I would like to refer to your previous panel as well. So now you mentioned about the entrepreneurship and PhDs. What I see that in the States there are more applications of the research. Yeah, so from Stanford, a lot of research is going to the business. What I see in Europe is that it's held in the universities. Any advice how to change that in Europe?
When I studied in the US, actually in Stanford, there was a startup on the floor -2 in the computer science department. It's contamination. Get people to talk together. And that is correctly so. I see in California, when you live there, everything is obvious. And you wonder why it's not that obvious everywhere. Because it is obvious in the right way. So I came back to Trento, it was obvious in another way. But to make it obvious so that it contaminates. And that's the only way to do it. It means changing the mind of professors, changing the mind of entrepreneurs, one by one, no other way. By the way, this is my everyday life, so in words, so this way I decided to answer this question.
Anybody else want to answer that question?
I would just add that it's largely cultural. So I'm not going to give you an answer on how do you change the culture. Changing culture takes a lot of time. and a certain type of strategy, but it happens at MIT, it happens at Stanford, it happens increasingly at universities across the US. And I think an obvious thing to consider is to employ more entrepreneurs as professors, or bring entrepreneurs who have left academia and come back into university. I'm sure some of that is being done, but you see that all over initiatives like MIT Media Lab and all of the imitators in the US. And I think that the key is folks have left with university knowledge, developed IP that's either patented or not, developed successful businesses, and then come back. And that's a key piece to develop.
Any other questions in the audience? You guys really want to fail again, or is somebody going to ask a question? Wow, good man.
Wow.
This is called wow for anybody that didn't know.
I'll wish you later, after a few years. Well, quick question. What do you think is the key thing that university should do to bring out more entrepreneurs?
Hire Sean to teach a class on entrepreneurship.
That's very unscalable, but
Somebody be a big class. Maybe I can try saying something on that. Because it's funny, but when we started several years ago with our fund in Sofia, Bulgaria, there was very little notion of what entrepreneurship, seed capital, technological companies, and all those buzzwords means, right? And we went to the universities, actually. I went to the technical university, and there was a room actually twice bigger than this full of people. We presented what we're doing, giving money to entrepreneurs, and I asked, how many of you here would like to become entrepreneurs? And there was just one hand in the whole room. It was shocking. A few years later, this year, basically, I was invited to the technical university again. They have elective bunch of people. I asked the same question. Everybody raised hand. So it takes time. Things change, slowly change. Entrepreneurship become a curriculum for the first time this year in the American university. So basically, again, we have a curriculum entrepreneurship. So things are moving. Just need time.
So we talked a little bit earlier about your visions, each of you, on what makes a great team, personalities. Now, each of you in 3 different roles hear ideas every single day. What ideas inspire you the most? It might not be a specific idea, but are there types of ideas? Are there social ideas? Are there health? I know Andy worked CTO of Happify, but in general, we see tons of ideas, and there's tons here. Are there certain ones that excite you the most? Who wants to start?
that's all right. Believe.
You start with it.
This is difficult, really.
I'm only asking for questions. Boring, easy questions are boring, and they're all going to fall asleep, and that's no fun.
Well, listening to ideas is what I do for a living, I guess.
So you must know which ones you like.
So, what doesn't excite me, of course, is to hear the next loyalty outcome. The typical cases we hear every day. What is really exciting for the venture capitalist is when he basically see the excitement in the startup founders, basically, and they are able to to unite this excitement also at the partners of the fund. So basically, what is really inspiring is when you see this drive, this strong motivation in the founders to do it, to basically realize it. And there is no specific topic, I think, that it's really inspiring. There are specific people who are basically very good in doing it.
Okay, so give us an example of how is it obvious when you see somebody that has that drive? What do they do?
Oh, well, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not obvious at the first hand. So that's why we try to spend a little bit more time with the team. But then you're able to say that these people are intrinsically motivated, which means they're not there because it's cool to be a startup, but they're not there for the buzz. They're not there for the events. They have this drive to basically make this into a business, to realize this idea they have inside. And when we realize it's really something really emotional for them and really intrinsic motivation, is they're not driven from the outside, then this is basically a honest approach, right? Honest. When you see these, you get more insight, excited to be started searching more and deeper what exactly those guys are doing, because it seems interesting to work with them.
Andy? Also looks like he's ready.
Okay, I won't be ready, so I'll just go ahead and do it. Ideas that excite me, without the specific industries, but is this dead? No. I get excited about ideas that are relatively straightforward to build, only for the team that's talking to me. So, for example, I look at MVPs and things that can be launched within 6 months to a year that only the team that's pitching can build, which means it's not that easy to assemble a team and replicate the team dynamics and the technology, which is why I like talking to folks with particular expertise in machine learning for my company, Happify, for example. It's easy to build the UI of companies that I've built. It's hard to build the thing behind it. Only the team that has come together to build the company can do it in 6 to 8 to 12 months. Companies with great ideas that have something that's very easy to build, and since I'm a developer myself, it's pretty easy for me to see if they pass the BS test, as we call it, are far less exciting, unless they can build their product in a week. That would take someone else a month to build. So I think technical and intellectual integrity and potentially patentable IP and something that can be built in startup time is interesting.
So I like those ideas that as soon as they tell me, they are obvious, like I have always known them. At the same time, it is obvious that to do them, to achieve them, is not obvious. But you kind of feel in your gut that they are doable in some finite amount of time.
So Sean, your favorite personality trait and your least favorite, one-word answers.
So I'd say my favorite personality trait, for sure, is just hustle. Like, there's something about people who they can't imagine failing because success is like the only option, and they will just hustle their way through to make it work. And as